Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out the 4-color Overlord deck with Zur Eternal Schemer, something you might have seen before, a 3-mana 1/4 flyer, giving enchantment creatures we control Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, and for 2 mana we can turn a non-aura enchantment we control into a creature in addition to its other types, and base power and toughness each equal to its mana value. So Zur has always been a powerhouse when combined with a Leyline Binding, turning it into a 6/6 creature with Death Touch, Hexproof, and Lifelink. Very difficult to outrace for some of the aggro decks. And then now we can also combine Zur with the various overlords. We can impend them first, in the case of the green overlord, making an everywhere land token, which also has all 5 basic land types, so we can now cast a 1-mana Leyline Binding, and then at some point we can play Zur and have the leftover mana to immediately activate it, turn the overlord into now a 5/5 creature with Hexproof, Death Touch, and Lifelink, and then immediately attack, making another everywhere token, so we don't have to wait for all those time counters to go away. And then of course Overlord, also awesome with cards like Up the Beanstalk, drawing an additional card even if we impend it, so that's a package we've implemented in quite a few decks by now. And then of course we've got the other overlords, the blue one drawing cards and discarding, and then the white overlord, a great finisher, making 2/1 insect tokens as well. And then rounding out the deck, we've got some more removal, the full set of Get Lost as a cheaper answer to creatures, planeswalkers, and enchantments. And then we can also maybe clean up those map tokens with a temporary lockdown, although can sometimes be a bit of a nombo with our own Up the Beanstalk, which is why we're also diversifying with Split Up, which can still maybe get rid of larger creatures as long as the opponent has a nice split of tapped and untapped creatures, and we can take care of most of them. And then we've got our Hurt Migration to maybe fix our colors early if we discard it, gaining some life. And eventually, even though we don't have any mountains in the deck, we can still make 5 beast tokens with it if we had an everywhere land token on the battlefield, thanks to the green overlord. And that's another great way to ramp to set up our more powerful plays. And then 2 copies of Sunfall as well to keep the board nice and clean. And then we already mentioned the Leyline Binding. Then we need a couple basics to also find with our Herd Migration, so 2 plains, 2 forest, 1 swamp, 1 island, and then a good mix of the Surveil lands entering tapped early, so those can also help set up our future draws. And then the multiple basic land types are also helpful for enabling our domain synergies. And finally, Cavern of Souls, often naming either Avatar or Horror to make those uncounterable, but occasionally can also go for Wizard or Human to make Zur uncounterable, which can also be important if you want to close out the game with it, or maybe you're missing the black mana to cast it, and then Cavern can also fix our colors. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw with a promising hand. Always love having Beanstalk, and then can impend Overlord thanks to the Cavern, which will get our mana sorted for Split Up and Binding. Still a little bit slow and vulnerable to a super aggressive start. Turn 1 Llanowar Elves is not bad. And then a white Overlord would be another way to trigger Up the Beanstalk. But as possible, I prefer looking for another land here. Otherwise, our hand could be a little clunky. So black-green could still be kind of the Demons deck that we're used to seeing, with the added advantage of some mana acceleration. Creature's not bad either. But yeah, it's still Up the Beanstalk here. So they will get to draw some cards. But usually this Overlord deck can overpower most mid-range decks, which is kind of what our opponent's up to. Especially in best of 1, where they don't have a high density of discard spells like Duress. Although Frillback is quite effective, destroys our Beanstalk. Don't always see the Frillback in the main. Although we do have Beanstalks for days. Still gotta be Overlord here, so we can actually play 1 mana Binding next turn. And then Split Up also becomes an option. Creature lands can also be harder to interact with, because Binding says non-land permanents. Can still use Get Lost potentially. And a Dread Knight. And another one. So split up, destroying tapped creatures is decent. It leaves their opponent with double Dread Knight. They could animate Cottage, attack for 10. So it's still somewhat painful. Definitely want to use Herd Migration. Yeah, I imagine split up still the play. And then next turn we can try to clean up the Dread Knights with our Leyline Binding. And then I don't need to get another Plains, but I think it's still decent. Because we do need a lot of white mana if we want to activate Zur. Would much prefer if they don't animate the Cottage. But they've got the land for it. Now I do also have the option of playing Zur and then activating the Overlord, gaining 5. Puts us back up to 10, but then I could still potentially die, although we do also have a Leyline Binding now. So the Cavern is naming Wizard. Is there a world where we play up the Beanstalk here? I don't think so, even though we miss out on the Leyline Binding trigger. It's all about making sure we don't die here. So name Wizard, play Zur, and then I can activate on the Overlord while still having a Leyline Binding available, which is also good to activate Zur's ability onto. Problem with Zur is that it does die to just a 1 mana cut down. But we've got more in hand. So yeah, if they had cut down, untap land, activate Cottage, they could technically threaten lethal. But luckily for us, we have another Binding. And they don't seem to have another untapped land. Could take it, seems a little dangerous here, and I kind of want the Binding in play anyways for Zur. So this seems fine. There's still a chance they have enchantment removal. But it doesn't seem to be instant speed. And they're gonna go for the Throat Overlord. As we draw our own 7 mana Overlord as well. Yeah, could just cast that. Seems like a pretty good way to stabilize. As opposed to play Zur. Could still play Beanstalk as well, and then turn Binding into a 6/6 lifelink. This seems a little bit better to me. And then if the Overlord survives, great. If they have another go for the Throat, we'll still have our tokens to interact with. I guess there was a small consideration for just going Beanstalk, impend the Overlord. That way I could next turn play Zur and immediately guarantee an attack with our lifelinker while making more tokens. Nowhere to Run's also interesting, since that'll remove Hexproof from Zur's ability. But maybe another go for the Throat would have been better to take care of the Overlord instead. This attack is somewhat strange. Maybe they just want to draw a card with the Dread Knight. Can't think of many removal spells. I guess there's Virtue of Persistence, which could finish off the White Overlord. If they have an Edict, it would have to be Liliana to punish me for trading the 2/1, because Sheoldred's Edict gets rid of my non-token anyway. So yeah, it's basically Liliana versus Virtue of Persistence, which is more likely. Feels like if they had a Virtue, they would have kept Nowhere to Run in hand to combine both, but of course they could have top-decked one of them. So I feel like a Liliana is more likely if I were to just trade the Insect. So I'll try this approach. And it's possible they just want Dread Knight to die so they get a redraw. Alright, and a Preacher, that's all fine by me. So it's time for Beanstalk. And then we can still Zur activate. And Surveil. And I'll take another Overlord. And then we can activate on the binding, since our opponent's kind of priced into trading for the Overlord anyways. Get in there, make more tokens. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is not particularly exciting. Have a little bit of interaction. 3 basic types to maybe cast a cheaper binding. But no real card draw, no Overlords. I'll take a mulligan. Alright, this seems better. And then... yeah, Lockdown versus Get Lost. I think we need to keep all the lanes. Lockdown a bit of a number with the Beanstalk, although it could be a lifesaver if we're up against aggro. So it's a tough call to make. Get Lost and Lockdown can be kind of a combo, since we can exile the map tokens as well. So maybe I actually get rid of a land here. Sure. Opponent's blue-black. And then don't need another Get Lost. Now we're looking for Overlords. Will our opponent have a counterspell? Could slow play Beanstalk, mostly because of the lockdown as well. And then the question is tap land versus Cavern to keep up Get Lost. Probably just a tap land. If they go Flash Creature, Ninjutsu Kaito, we can still Get Lost or Binding the Kaito Planeswalker. Now an Overlord, eventually something to trigger Beanstalk, so I think we'll keep that. It's gonna be an Augury, I see, so it's a poison deck. So not quite what I had in mind. This could actually be a tougher matchup. Our removal is not gonna find many targets. But our opponent's gonna have fistfuls of removal instead. At least Cavern of Souls making Overlord uncounterable is gonna be important. And then, yeah, I think I'll Surveil before drawing, and we can get rid of a split up. This might get countered. It does not. And then Zur's good to have in the back pocket. 3 steps ahead to draw and discard. I mean, I'm still assuming this is a poison deck, but maybe it's more of a Mind Splice, kind of a ramp deck. So keeping up a leyline binding could be important. So maybe wait on the Overlord for a turn. Still a close call, because we can cast an uncounterable Overlord. If they play Mind Splice, they get to untap. But then they'll be able to give their spells a discount already. And yeah, if they discarded one, they must have another in hand. I think I'll just keep up 4 mana. And then hope they play Mind Splice end of turn. Which they do. So we get to exile it while drawing a card. And the replacement binding is great. They could have a third apparatus, because they did discard one of them, and they know about a leyline binding being a thing. So this name's Avatar instead of Wizard, I think. And then, yeah, I might just pass with binding up once again. To try and snipe a third apparatus. Alright, this time they've got a robbery for 3. That happens. Pretty good in this matchup, to be fair, because all our cards are high impact. So that's their eventual win condition that they're trying to combine with a discount from apparatus. They're playing white as well. And an Overlord impended. Okay, that happens. Could Get Lost the creature and then lock down to clean up, although we'll get rid of our own Beanstalk. Still want to make use of my mana. And yeah, the opponent's not going to be presenting many creatures themselves. I thought we were already in the end step. Now I give them the opportunity to explore. Alright, so I'm less incentivized to lock down now, which is maybe a good thing. And then I think just cast Overlord now. And our opponent could have the cover-up to extract certain cards out of our deck. For now, just an Edict. And another Overlord. The goal might be to play Zur and then attack for lethal in one turn once we accumulate enough enchantments. So we can play around more sweepers at sorcery speed. So we could impend the Overlord and have that ready to combine with Zur at some point. And then I guess we can impend another Overlord as well. Sure. I'll save Cavern for Zur, so we can guarantee that resolves. And then now a tap land can go. I think we're okay trading tokens, just to kind of clear a path for our bigger stuff. So now it's mostly about building up our mana. And I kind of like just impending again. So it's harder for them to interact with. Got double binding. This will be useful. Is it time for another robbery? Mystical Teachings instead. Fair enough. And gets time stop to take an extra turn. So that could potentially mess up our Zur combo turn. Do we get lost to Overlord? Sure. Take our turn. So yeah, I could try casting Zur and then see if they want a time stop. Since we have another one. That resolved. Could still activate. We have triple binding as more 6/6 creatures basically. And then maybe animate the blue Overlord so we can draw. Opponent's gonna anoint Zur. So I could activate again. Opponent still has time stop mana up. And then maybe go for a green Overlord to give us more mana. But yeah, we could see them time stop and then next turn on tap wipe the board. So don't want to go too crazy. Opponent time stops as expected. And a deadly cover-up. Ooh, are they gonna exile Zur from my deck? Could certainly be the case. Because that's probably the scariest card for them to face. No, opponent got rid of the white Overlord. So that kind of worked out. So now our opponent has 5 mana left. I can cast Leyline Binding just to put it on the battlefield and turn it into a creature. So let's see, play Zur, 1, 2, 3 activations. So it's only 19 damage if we animate White Overlord. So it's not quite lethal. And of course our opponent could still have other spells in hand. Yeah, I mean, it's still a redraw with Up the Beanstalk, so I think I'm okay putting these on the battlefield. And then at least if the bindings get removed, the opponent will not get anything back. Might want to hang on to one of them, though. Yeah, I guess if I draw an untapped land, I could still activate a 4th. But I have to imagine that they have at least 2 answers, one for Zur and then one for one of our creatures. So maybe our plan needs to wait another turn. But then we give them access to more mana. Found the untapped land. So that could be huge. So play an uncounterable Zur. And then we're going to go activating. They don't have mana for time stop this time. I don't think they're on Aetherize necessarily, but it is possible. Opponent casts an Augury, so they're desperately digging. Don't need to worry about Aetherize anymore. Maybe if they have cut down into removal, but no, our opponent explodes, so our plan worked perfectly. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a decent hand. 3 types for binding, so we can cast it as a follow-up to our Beanstalk. And then we already have Lockdown. Sunfall might be overkill. Would rather find some of our Overlords. And I'll still play the Beanstalk. Especially if our opponent has a discard spell. Want to get it in play. Alright, still nothing. Can play tapped Hedge Maze, so we have double green available. And then I'll still have double white for the Overlord. Portico could be fine. Just want to keep hitting land drops. Yeah, sure. Although finding black mana eventually for Zur could also be important. And there's a Slasher, good target for Leyline Binding. Although I could still play the Overlord and then maybe chump the Slasher. And then keep binding for maybe some of their demons. They also have to be worried about Sunfall, although I did put one in the graveyard. Alright, so do we want to take a lot of damage or do we double block? They might use removal on a token. Yeah, I think that's reasonable too. Alright, so now we don't need to worry about Slasher for some time. And the Annex also good to exile before they draw too many cards off of it. So that's probably what we'll do. Just binding. Could potentially draw into a 2-drop like a Get Lost that I want to keep available too. So a couple options. I'll just cast the binding first. Found the green Overlord, that's excellent. And then I probably don't need Forest anymore. Alright, so next turn I can cast it, which will fix our colors for Zur. They do now make a 6/6 demon. Split up's not bad either. Definitely better than Lockdown, although Lockdown still deals with a demon token. think I'm still leaning towards just casting the Overlord, drawing a card, and then next turn we can maybe start answering the opponent's creatures. Yeah, that seems okay by me. So we'll draw, and then I'll surveil afterwards. And then Cavern doesn't seem needed anymore. We have our black mana for Zur. Now the Slasher is tapped. Could be good or bad, depending on how Split Up lines up. But yeah, assuming they just attack for 6, then Split Up can destroy tapped creatures, and then we can attack with Overlord. Rush of Dread. Alright, so discard 3 cards. So our opponent is trying to combine this with a Bloodletter for the one-hit KO. Definitely don't mind getting rid of a lockdown or 2. And then maybe a tap land at this point. And then Split Up, assuming they attack with a demon. Should be good. So destroy tapped creatures. And then now play Zur activates. And where do we activate? Overlord turns into a creature end of turn anyway, but if I do it now, I'll get the tokens a little bit sooner. So I think I prefer that. And then it's also 7/7 compared to a 6/6. So we've got a bit more protection in case of an Edict effect. So our opponent is facing lethal even if they remove Zur, so they need multiple removal spells. And they did have the Edict, actually. Yeah, I imagine we keep the Overlord still. We already got to attack with lifelink once, so our life total's not in danger. And now Deep Cavern Bat seeing a land. 2 mana left, could be another answer for the Overlord, nowhere to run. Takes out a token. So yeah, our opponent's probably chumping here. Get to surveil. Let's see what they can come up with. And the rest, once again, seeing a land. So yeah, the discard spells can be very good early, but at some point we're going to be empty-handed. Herd Migration cast is also pretty strong. So if we attack, our opponent is forced to chum block. Not where the Bloodletter wants to be. And then don't see a reason not to cast a Herd Migration. I guess they could have a board wipe. If they somehow have removal spell, top deck another Bloodletter, we can still chump. So yeah, I think we'll just pass, maybe even keep land in hand in case they make me discard. But something like a cover-up to wipe the board could be realistic. And then it's nice to have a follow-up Herd Migration. But yeah, if we only had the 1 token, then that would not have been safe. But I think most of these black mid-range decks are gonna favor the domain strategy, since they're not the fastest usually, and our late game is just gonna overpower them most of the time. But occasionally, if they start out with like a Duress into a Deep Cavern Bat, and then set up Slasher into Bloodletter, they might be able to take away the only interaction we have. And then get a quick kill. So that's mostly what they're trying to accomplish in this matchup. But on average, the game's gonna drag out a bit. Opponent seems to have disconnected. But yeah, it was also still kind of an interesting decision with Zur, whether to animate Overlord or the Binding. Because had we animated Binding, we would have had a 6/6 creature in the meantime. But then again, if it does get removed eventually, they'll get their room back. Although if they get their room enchantment back, both chambers would be locked, so they would have to pay mana to unlock those once again. Top deck Zur, so may as well play it. But our opponent seems AFK, so they're probably gonna explode before we get a chance to attack. And there we have it, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We do not have any cheap interaction. Overlord on 3 as our first play. On the play we can maybe get away with this. On the draw this would probably be a mulligan. But yeah, I'll try it. And then I'll keep a plains, since we'll eventually need double white as well. Opponent also with the hedge maze, so they might be trying to do something similar. Probably don't need a second white overlord though. Prefer finding up the beanstalks and leyline bindings. Opponent kept on top. And we get to ramp. And maybe next turn we'll just cast the Overlord. Alright, Founding, so it is more of a graveyard deck perhaps. Prankster. So yeah, opponent's a Squirming Emergence deck. So yeah, they can also cheat some powerful things into play. Although I feel like our late game is still potentially better once we get to it. Although we're kind of missing the card draw element at the moment. Kind of depends how the opponent has configured their deck. Some of these versions can also just combo kill with Jace. Portal to Phyrexia, I guess, would be a problem. So that's why finding a leyline binding is important. Alright, and on Omniscience, so yeah, if they can cheat Omniscience into play, they might be able to win in one big turn. Our opponent's just missing a black source to cast the Squirming Emergence, and then I believe they already have enough permanents here to get back Omniscience. So it's not looking good. If they're missing lands, it means their hand is all spells, which is good with an Omniscience in play. So what's the best we can do? Play Zur, activate on the Overlord, and get in for 11. And then next turn we're presenting lethal. As opposed to play another Overlord with Impend. And then next turn I can play Zur, activate twice. So yeah, either way works. Up the Beanstalk is maybe a little bit late to the party. So I'll just impend here and keep Zur as a surprise. This also shields us a bit better from Portal to Phyrexia if they go for that. So opponent forced to exile an instant or sorcery, even if they cannot cast it. And then mill 4, but the question is, can they draw an untapped black source? Does not seem to be the case. And yeah, they found a black source, but it's a Valgavoth's Lair entering tapped. So, goes to show the importance of having a good mana base. Top deck to Leyline Binding, so that can remove a blocker. So then I can still Zur activate twice, so that's just what we need. So our opponent's not going to get another turn to combo off. Otherwise we could easily beat that next turn. Alright, sweet. And our opponent explodes. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a hand that just needs basically a land number 3 to be functional. And we get a redraw with Up the Beanstalk. So we'll give it a shot. There's a few tap lanes we could draw into as well. So those are not ideal. Opponent on a life gain deck, so Sunfall's going to be great. For now, Beanstalk. Can also prioritize playing more basic types for Domain, although once we impend the Overlord, we'll get to play a 1-mana Binding. Right, Channelers, so it's more of a black-white life gain deck. So we do have to watch out for a Deep Cavern Bat sniping the Sunfall, but we've got a binding to answer it. Alright, so we'll just keep on ramping here. Not really planning to Sunfall next turn, but having the option is nice. Alright, it's going to be a Gorehound, so this looks more like a Raise the Past deck that's trying to fill the graveyards and then bring everything back. There's the bat. So, yeah, Sunfall's very brutal. Opponent has to take it. Alright, so gotta hope they don't have another Deep Cavern Bat, pretty much. For now, play another Beanstalk. And could impend another Overlord. Is that better or worse than... I guess never mind, I don't even have double green up, in which case I should have left up Cavern. But yeah, the plan was going to be to cast a binding here. But yeah, let's say we had the opportunity to impend another Overlord, we would get to draw 2 more, and then we're more likely to find several answers in case I do have a second Deep Cavern Bat. Although we still get to draw 2 off Leyline Binding. And then... yeah, probably fine to save myself 1 damage. Now our opponent knows not to overextend into the Sunfall, but the problem they're facing is that we're just getting so far ahead on card advantage with Beanstalk. And yeah, they have enough pressure in play. But our opponent actually found another Deep Cavern Bat, so the game goes on. Also have the option of just exiling the Channeler, of course. So we could die. Opponent also has a Pain Land to give SS Channeler flying, but Zur, perhaps to the rescue, can play a blue source, and that will help us animate the Leyline Binding. So yeah, if the plan is to play Zur, I pretty much have to attack, because Channeler is just going to fly on the way back. And then gaining 6 is hopefully enough. Could also animate the Overlord. Then it's only going to be a 5/5, but also get to ramp with it. Yeah, maybe that's still preferred. Because then, if we find a Sunfall, we don't give them a Deep Cavern Bat back. And then Zur can maybe still chump an SS Channeler if needed. So we're back up to 11. So the Channeler flies. And it's just a matter of time until we find an answer to the Deep Cavern Bat and get our Sunfall back. Alright, Starscape Cleric is potentially more damage. So are we forced to chum block? Opponent still has some mana, so they could play a creature's second main to surprise us. Deep Cavern Bat will gain 1, so that's 1 more damage. So yeah, we cannot afford to block the Deep Cavern Bat, we have to chump SS Channeler pretty much. Otherwise we die. So not ideal. But we get a few more looks at an answer here with Blue Overlord. And that's also Flying Blocker, so we're not necessarily dead. And then I'm probably fine to wait on playing my land out. Draw to discard, found a binding, and a Get Lost, perfect. So, can get rid of a land. And then, do we want to do this now? I guess we could wait and see, and react at instant speed. Probably leave the Overlord back this turn. So we're not dead on board. Opponent flies a Channeler again for a life creed duo. So that would essentially drain me with a Starscape Cleric. And we want to remove that now. Because they might play another creature and then Cleric is potentially 2 damage. I'm fine potentially chumping with the Overlord of the Flood Pits, since it's going to get exiled by Sunfall anyway, most likely. Exiling the Cleric is maybe better long term. So they cannot raise the past it back. But yeah, now the plan is definitely to chump the Channeler, otherwise, if we destroy it, they could move the counters elsewhere. Opponent goes to attackers. Just gets in with the Channeler. I'll block. And our opponent's going to pass, holding some stuff back. But yeah, now it's time to get our Sunfall back. Split up would also be decent here, to be fair, but just making sure to exile their stuff so they cannot erase the past everything back is important. So I'm also not going to attack first, otherwise they can chump with a bunch of creatures. Although now that we exiled the Cleric, they may not be able to set up a one-hit KO. So there's a lot to consider still. But let's just Sunfall and keep it simple, draw 2 more. And then we're not really struggling for ways to end the game here. Probably fine to impend the White Overlord. And then next turn we can animate it with Zur. And then discarding 3 cards. Mostly lands at this point. Alright. Yeah, the back-to-back Deep Cavern Bats almost stole the game. But I don't really see them recovering now. SS Channeler on top. Opponent bins it. So, don't think there's a way for us to win the game this turn. Play Zur, can activate it 3 times. Double A-line binding and Overlord. Attack all out. They can trade for the Overlord. Chump. And then still take at least 10 damage. Yeah, that seems good enough here. Just making sure we keep as much white mana available as possible. Could also just get lost the Pilgrim so they don't get to trade for it. Because there's still a little bit of danger with them potentially getting to trade with a binding that has a Cleric underneath and then casting a big Raise the Past. But yeah, we should be fine. The opponent takes it, falls to 2. They need their own sweeper. And yeah, there's Raise the Past. So we weren't being paranoid. Deep Cavern Bat has a look, and then our opponent's probably just dead here. Pilgrim gaining 4 life. They don't have a way to give Channeler flying in my turn. So the 2/1 tokens might be able to get there. Opponent keeps filling the graveyard for maybe a second Raise the Past. They can still explore. 1 unknown card in hand. So yeah, opponent definitely fought a good fight, they didn't give up. But we had a great start with double up the beanstalk, so it was a little bit too much value for them to overcome. So yeah, this 4-color Overlord deck powered by Zur seems to be the real deal. Definitely one of the more powerful decks in the current standard, assuming you can get to the mid to late game, since the deck can sometimes be weak to some of the more aggressive starts. If we don't have one of our cheaper sweepers, then a deck like Red-White Auras or Mono-Red can certainly take us out before we get to those powerful turns with Zur. So yeah, overall definitely a good deck for the current ladder, but because aggro decks are quite prevalent, you will still end up losing to those a fair bit. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.